Hi guys, Mr. Hyatt here. This is the Chapter 6 APES lecture. We start out with an investigation on coral reefs. Hopefully by now you're an expert on reefs and reef structure. So you notice that they do demonstrate a mutualistic relationship. We've got the polyps and the single-celled algae called zooxanthellae, and the zoox get a place to live and the polyps get energy. The algae can go through photosynthesis and can provide energy to the coral. Problems are that reefs grow really slowly and they're susceptible, as you know, to excess soil runoff, climate change, and ocean acidification in particular. So you already know how important reefs are and what we need to do to protect them. So kind of keep that case study in mind as we move through Chapter 6. Diving into a little bit of that weather and climate stuff that you guys looked at last week. What factors influence climate? Well, of course, incoming solar energy. The sun is going to influence our climate. The Earth's rotation for sure is going to. Air and water circulation patterns are going to. Gases in the atmosphere. Which gases in the atmosphere? Relative concentrations of gases in the atmosphere and things along those lines. And then finally, topography. Or the Earth's surface features, which should sound a little bit like yesterday's lab. The Earth does have a lot of different climates. Notice that, again, weather and climate are not the same. The basic definition or summary would be that the weather is the short-term conditions, and climate is the average weather for at least 3 decades. So when we talk about climate change, we're not talking about it's hot out today, it's cold out today. We're talking about a pattern of at least 3 decades being different from the climate previous to those 3 decades. Of course, climate's going to be different in different regions and tends to follow horizontal stripes across the Earth. Here's a picture of Earth's climate zones. Again, you can kind of see how we have stripes across the Earth. Latitudinal stripes should make sense because the sun is going to strike at roughly the same angles across and things along those lines. So what you're seeing here are circulation patterns. We'll get to that here in just a minute. Of course, climate's going to be influenced by ocean currents and wind. They're going to spread heat around, and of course precipitation. That happens unevenly. So we're going to have ocean currents that move surface water, and of course surface water is going to be a little bit warmer than deep ocean water, things along those lines. Coastal areas are going to get rain pretty significantly off of the ocean. We tend to have mountains that cause a rain shadow. We'll get to a rain shadow here in a minute. But those wind and ocean currents are going to carry heat around because as you'll see here in a minute, we get uneven heating of the Earth. And so if we have uneven heating, we're going to have uneven movement and uneven distribution of heat, because we know anytime something gets hot, it moves faster. So the Coriolis Effect is essentially the impact that the ocean and the atmosphere have on each other. The Coriolis Effect, like as you define it, is the deflection of a mass as it moves over a spinning surface. So that should sound like wind moving over the spinning Earth. As the Earth rotates, the surface near the equator spins a little bit faster than the regions to the north and the south, the polar regions. So that's going to cause winds to move in different ways. Winds that move north or south toward the equator cut to the west. So that's where our trade winds come from, because again, the center of the Earth is spinning faster than the poles. So that's going to cause north and south winds to be deflected just a little bit. Same thing with winds that are moving away from the equator. They deflect to the east, and those we call westerlies. You see easterlies are surface area that blows toward the poles. So those things are all sort of wrapped in together, and we call those prevailing winds. Next sort of phenomenon is called a Hadley Cell. They're going to essentially move heat and moisture directly vertically. You see there it happens a lot when heat from the sun evaporates ocean water and transfers that heat from the ocean to the atmosphere. So we've got a lot of water evaporating directly up quickly. That's going to cause a lot of the equatorial rainstorms and things like that we see. It's going to obviously mess with energy transfer and things along those lines. And here's a picture that kind of demonstrates a bunch of Hadley cells over here. It kind of shows how our winds are created, our westerlies and our trade winds and all that kind of stuff. So you see warm air moves down, cold air rises. Warm air moves down, cold air rises. And that's going to create currents, that's going to create wind. Next up is greenhouse gases and climate. I mentioned earlier that the atmospheric composition has a lot to do with our climate. Some of our solar energy is reflected back to us due to the greenhouse effect. We've talked about that already. And we're adding lots of carbon dioxide, we're adding lots of methanes, we're adding lots of bigger molecules to the atmosphere, so we're exaggerating the greenhouse effect. Of course, Earth's surface is going to affect local climates. Mountains can cause a rain shadow. I've got a picture of that on my next slide. Cities can create microclimates. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but typically in town or in a big city especially, we get it's hotter. Rainfall patterns can be different also. It's not just because of the fact that you've got buildings blocking the wind, but we've also got things like bricks, concrete, and asphalt that absorb heat and make it make it hotter, I'm sorry. Cars, of course, and we've got lots of heating and cooling systems. They're going to release heat and pollutants. So we can get a microclimate that's significantly different from the country surrounding that city. Here's our rain shadow. I kind of skipped over that so that I could talk from the picture. This reminds me a lot of California. There's ocean, and then there's a mountain directly off the ocean. And what we see is, before we get to the mountain, between the ocean and the mountain, there's a lot of rainfall. Well, then those clouds run into the mountain, and they're kind of physically stuck. So they're going to lose a lot of their water, lose their density, raise up. Once they go over the mountains, they're dry. So on the leeward side of the mountain, we end up with warm, dry air. It's going to lead to something like a desert. So that's 6.1. I'll pick up with 6.2 and 6.3. I guess the rest of chapter 6 in video 2.